All right. Welcome back to the Raised Hunting Podcast. And so today we have two special guests. And I use the term special
Hey, speak
loosely.
for yourself. I'm not special.
Whatever.
No, you're not.
All right. So what's going on, though, is we want to give
Stupido. That's Spanish for stupid.
That's not.
same, no matter how many times we do these introductions, I get the same crap from them. I know you guys are tired of it, so write in and let us know. We need the introductions to be clean so that we can have a conversation.
He's worse because he's the only person I know that talks more with his rear end than his front end.
Yeah.
I can't help
It's like
that.
your mouth goes directly to your ears, and you just like to listen to yourself talk.
All right. So today's topic, well, let me back up because we definitely want to thank you guys again because we've been asking, like on every podcast, I feel like we make sure we mention that we want the reviews from you if you don't mind. We also want you guys to share this with friends, and you guys have been doing that. The numbers have been steadily increasing, so we sure appreciate you guys. You also have been sending in ideas on topics, and we sure appreciate that so we can add it to the list. Keep in mind, some of you have been sending in some topics. I know one that's come in is food plots, and we're gonna slightly touch on that today, but we really want to do an entire topic about food plots. And so some of you just hang in there because we're trying to do stuff in a timely manner. So with that being said, today what we're going to talk about is about as timely as it gets, and that is we're not end of our season. We're 4 or 5 days away, and it ends on Tuesday.
4.
4 days. Okay, so we got
Yep.
4 days left. What are you doing from the time that deer season ends into going into the next season? You made the comment, Warren, that it's deer hunting 365 or it's deer hunting all year long.
You can't say that. He can't say that.
Why?
Because you have to take out about May, June, July, September, October, August. There's August in there. Wow, that was really dumb. He's got like 5 months in there where he isn't touching a single thing about a whitetail.
I'm pretty sure I killed my deer in October.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about you ain't doing no 365.
Okay. Well, some of us are. As much as we can. I'm
No, you
I'm
just
even
let me
in the boat.
correct it for you. You said
Okay.
that. Well, we can talk about what Easton and I would do because you don't do anything to this time period. And I said, no, I do more scouting now than I do. I don't do anything in the summer because I do it all right now. Here in the next 2 months.
Yeah. Yep.
okay.
So here we go.
All right, so let's talk about this time of year. I mean, and for people that are just listening, and you could be listening to this at any time, we're talking about typically January. I'm going to say January, February, because I do think that we come back and talk about this topic and maybe we break it into quarters. Maybe we break it into 3 months 2 or 3 months or something. But I think we'll want to come back and talk to this about what you're doing at a certain time, because people are asking us right now, what are you guys doing to get ready for, well, in your case, you're not done yet. So, you're still trying to kill a deer this year.
Yeah, I haven't really been doing any kind of prepping or anything, but I've been receiving a lot of good information.
Absolutely.
One thing I learned is that I suck at hunting late season, at killing a mature deer. We could have killed several really
Good
big
deer,
deer,
yeah.
but they're just young,
Yeah.
not the ones we're trying to kill. So that's been one really nice thing is that it gives you a good idea of who's made it, which doesn't. We just had one. We lost one the other day. I lost him or somebody else killed him. So it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it gives you a pretty good idea of the deer that you still do have around, and I think it gives you a good idea of where they spend a lot of their time. But I think that this year is a huge testament to it's way harder to kill a deer during late season if you don't have like standing beans or something like that. Just because we're like just bouncing around. We're seeing lots of deer and we're having lots of encounters, but like actually killing one is very difficult because there's no difference in any of our food. We have food, but there's a bean field here and a cornfield there and a bean field there, and there's not any difference in them. And so they just go to, it seems kind of random which ones they choose to go to and when they do it, which makes it really hard to kill one.
For sure. Well, I think you made the comment the other day. And again, this is finishing up the hunting season. This isn't necessarily getting ready for the next one, although we are. I mean, one of the things that I'm taking note on is if we're going to continue to hunt late season, and we are, and anyone else out there thinking about hunting late season, you really want to spend a lot of quality time, May, June, July, getting these food plots right. And what I mean by that, now some of that you're not going to be able to have any control over, and that's been our moisture situation out in the Midwest. And anyone who lives in Iowa, I know that Kansas, some areas like that, some of Indiana, Illinois, all dealing with the same thing. I mean, when I say a drought, I mean like major drought. You know, creeks that we normally have water running in them, and we've had issues with how to get across them. There's not a drop of water. I'm referring to when we found Joey's deer, you know, took pictures in the creek that normally has 6, 8, 10 inches of water in it, and there's nothing. It was dry. So you can't do anything about that other than you can look at maybe are there some things that you can plant that will help with that. But what you can look at is what are the deer doing as far as what food sources, because I think we're starting to pay more and more attention and get better at when they're going to corn, when they're going to beans, when are they going to the green, you know, meaning stuff that you plant, or are you leaving beans? But you brought up a question that I think we should throw in here, or not a question, maybe a statement that you've seen. You believe some of these mature deer are actually entering these fields according to wind direction.
I think it actually might even be all of them. So to give you guys a reference, there's a, well,
I shake my head no.
Okay, well then explain this to me. So how do I explain this for people? Just imagine an L, okay? And the one L is along a river bottom, and it's a cut bean field. And then the other L, I guess the vertical portion of the L is another bean field. And you can see each of them from a corner of that field. So far, we'd been spending the majority of our time in the one that borders the river. And that's because we were doing that when we had southern winds. And every time we had southern winds, we'd have these deer that would come up from the timber, and they all look down in the field for like 5-10 minutes, and then they do this Sparta sprint across the open hillside. And I don't know if that's every single one of them. I'm talking like 50, 60, 70 deer. I don't know if it's because they're nervous and they feel as though they're going to catch something, they're going to get caught on that open hillside or what. I don't know what it is. But my point with that is that, so then you and I were sitting there that one night along the river bottom. We had a southwest wind, and we saw not one, not two, but 3 mature bucks. Right. 2 that we know for a fact are 7-year-old deer, all go out in the field. And the one thing that was the same is they all came from the same place, which if you look at the wind, southwest wind, every single deer was able to enter that field and smell anything that had been out in that field before they entered that field. So then we had, where did we sit the blind first when we moved over there?
That was the third night.
So we sat that
down at the bottom of the hill because we were headed to the blind and the wind was wrong.
Okay, so the following day, Dad and I went back, and now we're sitting the vertical L bean field. We were trying to go to our blind, but the wind was swirling on us. It was supposed to be like east-northeast or something, and it ended up being pretty much
straight west.
Yeah, and that one I would say was not a very good judge, because I don't think a deer really could have. The wind was so variable that I don't think they could have planned anything on where they came out of. But we still saw, I don't know what,
30, 40.
Yeah, and they almost all came from the west on top of the hill. In fact, they might have all come from there, pretty much. Almost every single deer comes from the west, comes from up there. The next night, we actually do get a true northeast wind, okay? Dad and I sit there, and until the farmer drove up, we saw another 35, 40 deer, and they all came from, every single one of them came from the north or the west, and which they'd have been able to smell everything out in that field, okay? And there's a corner, the top left corner of that L, not a single deer came out there. Across from us, not one deer. Nick and I go back last night, and 30 of the 40 deer we saw all come out of that corner with a west wind, and there's timber over there. And not one deer came from the blind up there where we'd been seeing them. So to me, And then the big
Or they're
bucks,
avoiding you every time you're going in there a different way.
there's no way they know.
I'm just telling you, I saw 30 deer last night too, and not a single
Because
one
they end
even
up-
attempted to walk in the way with the wind.
They ended up at 80 yards from Nick and I. I mean, they 30, 40 deer doing, and not one comes from the grizzly blind. I don't understand why are they bouncing around like that? And that's the same corner where Dad and I didn't see a single deer. And then the only thing that you look at is what I was looking at with Nick is if we have a southwest wind where those bucks came out of that when the 3 of them came out there. So now I'm asking myself, was it a coincidence and it was just the perfect weather that those 3 bucks all came out that night? I don't think so, because we're seeing deer every single night. Or because if you look at it with southwest, I don't know how you could kill them, really. You might you
Not in
just
that
playing
field.
Russian roulette, because you're going to bust about 50% of the deer. And I guess whether they run into them or not, I don't know. But I'd be really interested to see if you sat there again, if you saw one of them.
Bad news
So-
is you got a northeast wind tonight.
It'd be good news, though, because it'd be interesting to see if you go and you sit there in that blind, if they all come from right there
It's
again.
north of you, yeah. I don't know. Could be.
If it's a northeast wind and they're coming from the north, they're not being able to smell anything.
Yeah, they are, because the field goes further to the north.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking where the blind is, if you're sitting in the blind and it's a northeast wind,
It's cutting across the alfalfa.
yeah, where are they coming from?
They're coming out of the timber north of there.
They ain't smelling anything. They're going with the wind.
No, they can
No,
smell
they
anything.
can smell the field.
From down in the bottom, that's it. They ain't smell. If they're going out to the alfalfa or the beans, they aren't smelling anything.
Yes, they are. Here, let me show you.
I don't. Well,
I don't
mean,
think the deer are. I think you're giving them entirely too much credit.
Well, I
Because
just don't
I'm-
understand how they keep doing it.
I think
They're called-
they're.
it's called deer.
Yeah,
and you're
they're-
talking to the guy that sat 50-some days. I can tell you that they're figuring something out.
See, right there's the blind.
Yeah,
So
northeast.
they can stand right there and they can smell anything out here.
You're telling me they're coming from here, right?
They were,
The
and
only
then the wind
field that they
switched,
can
and they
smell
weren't.
from is right there. That's the only field that they. Any place they can smell anything from.
No, they're coming out here. They can stand right here and they can smell anything out here in the corner of this field. I don't think they're worried about over here because they're going to go right there and feed.
I think
I
that
don't
you're
know.
completely
I
exaggerating
can't
that.
say that. I can't say that I'm 100% on that one yet. It would be different. I think Warren and I might be more inclined if we were still seeing the big bucks, the mature bucks, not come out in the other field or go
You should
over
be able
here.
to, if that's the case,
We're
you should
not
be able to figure out
seeing
exactly
them.
where they're going.
I mean, we've seen them the one night, then we don't see them for 3 or 4 times. Don't know that one evening you saw 3 big bucks way far away. Could have been them. I don't know.
Well, I'm wondering if they're going to different food sources.
Right.
And I think that I agree. Usually I don't think the deer are doing that. I do wonder if after 3 months of deer season and shotgun season and everything else, that now everybody's just a little bit more on edge and careful
sure.
about what they're doing.
They might be more wary, but at the same time, you got to also look at, we've had snow on the ground. It's all melted. We've had warm weather, and this is all in the past 2 weeks. We've had 50-degree weather, and we've had sub-30-degree weather. Now snow back on the ground. They're going to hit different things with different weather.
Well, let's talk about those
They
weather.
hit the same food sources.
What do you?
though.
Okay, hold on.
They're going corn, beans.
I don't
Sometimes they're
agree with
not
that.
there. They're not in the same
I
spot.
totally disagree, and here's why I'm saying, and that's what I want to hear. Each of because all of us have been hunting in some figurative way. I was with Mitch, and so I was watching the food, and when it was really cold, when we had that butt cold stuff that came in here that nobody liked, and it was horrible. The deer on the one farm we were hunting was corn. They vacated that in a hurry. There were still some deer
Yeah, they were
there.
hitting beans at that time.
They switched to the beans. When the snow left and it got a little bit warmer, then all of a sudden they started showing back up on that cornfield, and they started hitting it again. When it got even warmer, like thawed days where, it was kind of just wet, now they showed up on green.
Where?
At my house. Right at my house.
He did tell me that, so I'd go shoot some does.
Yeah, but where I was hunting, beans every night. 50 of them.
Yeah, but you also are talking
You're
about
also
150
saying that you haven't
deer.
been able to find them, though, either. You're not seeing all the same deer.
A lot.
You're seeing a lot of deer, but you're not seeing your bucks or anything. So they could be going to different places.
Well, I'm seeing some of the. There's been several big deer I've seen several nights in a row. They're just not mature deer.
Yeah,
Well, I'm telling you right now, last night explained why they'd be walking into hay. And it's not alfalfa. It's just grass field. That's all it is.
Because that's what's available to them there.
No, it's not. There's beans right 100 yards away.
Those are
No,
not
not
really
his.
beans.
Yeah, they are right across the road, 100 yards away.
Because I don't think those deer want to go across the road and be out in that big, huge open field before dark.
Well, one of the things, the bean field that you're hunting, meaning Warren, it's loaded. Like, as in, you can see, even though it was harvested, they've knocked a lot of beans off, and there's beans laying all over the ground. I saw them when we were walking across there. So that could be one of the facts that, it's just got a lot of food in it, period.
Yeah.
I don't know about the field that's farther east that you're contending with, that sometimes they're down there, sometimes they're not. But the ones like that cornfield, I completely lost my deer. I mean, we were all set. Mitch was going to have a good hunt. We're going to sit right here in this blind that I put there. And I had this buck that was coming not every night, but maybe every other night. I had him 4 times in 6 nights or 7 nights. We go to sit there. Not a deer shows up. Got warmer the next day. Didn't show up the next day, but the next day at like 4 o'clock, hour and 30 minutes before dark, and there he was, plus another big buck, jumped the fence and walk out in the corn, along with a whole bunch of other deer.
Right.
So there's definitely something to understanding the food pattern as it relates to cold weather, snow cover, whatever it may be.
So I guess that's something we need to define. When we're talking about getting ready for next year, are we talking about getting ready for late season? Are we talking about getting ready for hunting season in general, or bow season, or what?
Well, I believe that what we're talking about is making sure that you're understanding. I think that the food sources, not that I didn't know this already before, but the food sources play a huge factor. They don't play as big a factor, I don't believe, in October, because everything is available.
So let's touch on that then. So that's one thing people might be wanting to pay attention to for next year is the crop rotation.
Absolutely.
How big of a difference do you think that is making in as far as the deer that you're seeing? Like I know people that will say that a buck will move where he's living based on the crop rotation. Do you think that that's true? And then based on the crop rotation, how does that change how you hunt?
I think 100%. Let me clarify. I think, like in my situation, 100%. I know for a fact crop rotation affects where my deer are at. But at the same time, that's because I'm all timber pretty much and have a little bit of food, and then everything around me is food.
Okay, so how much though? So like, do you think are they moving
massively?
I'm saying, how far are they moving? Are they moving a mile, or
No,
are your deer leaving from you, or they're just going to different places to feed?
They're not necessarily leaving because there's enough land that they don't have to leave, but they're going to different sides of it. So like, when the first year I noticed that they were completely moved was probably 3/4 of a mile or so from where I had hunted them pretty much all the year before to where they were the next year.
So when you say move, like changing bedding areas?
Bedding areas complete, like they had all gone. Like I hunted. That was one of the years I hunted till December 2nd or 3rd, and I didn't find those deer until I finally said, I don't know where they've all gone, and I moved like 200 yards from where one of my stands was at, and found all of them. And so like the last week and a half I was hunting is where they were all at, and they had all been there the whole entire year. And they were bedding there and going to different food. And I was hunting in a spot where they were the previous year, but they had no reason to come over there. They weren't coming over that way, and they weren't bedding in that area anymore. They had now moved further to like the northeast and going out to the north instead of out to the south. So I had to completely change. But now I know I can pay attention to what the crop rotations are and have an idea where they're going to be at, or somewhere in the general idea.
And I think that Easton brings up a valid point, and that depends on the terrain or the geographic area, how much food there's around or not. Because I would tell you in some instances, a Juice, for instance, crop rotation didn't matter to that deer. He lived where he lived, and that's where he was going to stay. Mm-hmm. Whether the neighbor planted beans or corn.
Do you think he was maybe traveling any further to go to a bean field or a corn field, and he would just do it at night?
I don't know. I mean, that's where going back and actually looking at trail cameras, that was going to be one of my tips to people is start going back. Don't pull your trail cameras as soon as the season's over or as soon as you've killed your buck. Keep your trail cameras out there. Keep getting those photos. See what's going on, because I think it will open your eyes. One of the things that I still can't believe it, but our rub trees are still getting hit some. You saw 2 bucks yesterday going at it. I mean,
hard.
Well, and I think that that I would think
And today's
is probably
January 6th in
Right.
Iowa, so
probably
January 5th.
kind of just like they'll hit scrapes all the time.
Right.
It's just a communication thing. So what I do think that's interesting though, because I'm remembering juice, and I do think that, and I'm thinking of some of the stuff on your place. I don't think that your crops matter near as much in October, and then dependent upon the weather in November.
Correct.
Because I don't think the deer spend quite as much time in the ag fields as people think they do. They don't necessarily need to. Now, I think that if you get weather like we did this year, where it goes to 15 degrees and snow, you need to be paying a lot more attention to
late
your ag.
October, early November. I mean, we had it like real fast.
Yeah,
Well-
but because then if you think of Juice did leave, or at least he would travel more when you got to late season or postseason. Because if you remember, where that guy found his sheds,
Right.
that he doesn't go over there.
Very often.
Yeah, the majority of the time of the year. But we also never had one of his sheds, and I think it was strictly food, because wasn't he's moving it consecutively, wasn't he? Every year.
I mean,
That was disgusting.
I don't think he was staying on us. He was going over to your
I think
neighbors,
He stays on the neighbors, and that's who was picking up all the sheds, except for the 1 year.
and that had to have been because of food, I'd imagine.
I would think so. But
Yeah.
then again, the neighbor said that he had him all the way down by his house once in a while. There was
During the rut or something.
I don't know when it was, but it was a couple times during the year that he would randomly show up down there.
The year you killed him.
No,
Okay.
no.
Elway would be one that I don't know how great of an example he would be, but he changed because I had him in one spot. You kept telling me don't worry too much because last year he was where he was at frequently, and I had him on camera. I don't know, since like late October for like a month and a half straight, like every week, multiple days. He was in the same field all the time, whether he's chasing does or fighting or just feeding. And this year, he was in the same area, but I never got a single picture of him or any inclination even that he was in that field at all this year. So it would be completely different this year. Now, granted, he was bedding in the same areas, I think, as opposed to last year, but he was not going to the same places and going to the same food. And it was corn and beans different. So last year was beans.
I think if we take a scenario like what Eli deals with, where his timber is much smaller and his corn and bean rotation, I bet you if we ask Eli, it has a huge effect on the deer, or it doesn't, because they don't have any other place to cut through. I mean, it's because he's shaking his head no. Other than I know when I can tell him that, and I bet he shakes his head yes, is when it's left standing corn. Then it has an effect on you because basically you've increased the timber. They got a place to live.
Yep.
But
I think there can be an advantage to your standing corn. Like when Eli and I almost killed KB, I think the only reason that deer was out there during the time of day that he was because it was standing
corn.
still. Yeah. So,
yeah, if you can catch that waterway or that, like in that particular situation, you were just on the edge of the field.
yeah,
And
but
he
there was
felt
that little crossing spot
Yeah,
between
but
two
he-
standing cornfields.
Right, and he felt super comfortable about, I can walk out here. No one's going to have a clue that I'm here.
Mhm.
You probably won't see that deer next to the road.
Right.
You got to get back there where they are. And that's, again, where trail cameras or the cheater cameras can come into a huge effect. Stick a cellular camera back there, and all of a sudden he's there, that kind of thing. So playing the food, I mean, this whole thing is supposed to be about scouting, but I think that is a big part of it. If you're not taking food that much in consideration of your deer hunting situation, you're missing it's probably the largest, because where you congregate the animals, the does, the bucks, everyone, that's where all the rutting activity is going to take place. That's where the fighting is going to take place. That's where you're going to food really plays a huge factor.
When you put it that way, I mean, we may not be necessarily throughout the rut or depending on what food plots and stuff we have in, we may not specifically be hunting food throughout the entirety of the year until you get to like a situation like late season, or you get to a situation in November where they're shut down enough to where they have to survive. But food is also at the same time the whole reason where you're hunting where you're at. Because, like, for me, I'm not hunting the actual food, but I'm hunting where I know the deer are at because of the food.
Right, they're coming back or
So
going
whether
to.
it's during the rut or not, I'm still paying attention to, like, if this is corn this year and last year it was beans and they're over here instead, I'm still hunting the food. I'm still hunting the reaction and the habits they create off of the food, but I'm not necessarily sitting on a bean field like I would late season, waiting for them to come out and eat.
I disagree to an extent on the food being that important. As far as,
Imagine that.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, you don't think the same on something. The only reason that I'll say this is East and I hunted a spot a few years ago that my biggest concern with it looked phenomenal. Like, it looked amazing to me. I'd walked it all in really good timber and everything, and I was like, this looks awesome. My only concern was that there wasn't any really food for half a mile or something like that. And, like, it was a pretty decent, which for Iowa, that a half a mile with no ag field is kind of a long ways.
Right.
And I was concerned that this is not going to be good because there was only one direction. Any other way, it was like a mile for these deer to get to any food. And then once I hunted it a few mornings, the deer were later. Like, it took them till 8:30, 9 o'clock to get back there. But it was just pouring in from all directions. And so that was when I learned that these deer will go, if they have to, I think they'll go quite a bit further than you think. But at the same time, I think a lot of them weren't going anywhere. Like, I think they were going out during night and they were hitting scrapes and feeding in on shrubs and things like that. But I don't know that all of them were going to an ag field. So to me, to kill those deer, finding where they were bedding and spending their time during the day was way more important, because I could see now where you could be the guy getting a picture of a monster and he's going a mile to bed.
You're talking about where we saw BZ and Marshmallow?
Yeah.
That's the exact spot I'm talking about, though, that I couldn't find the deer the one year because I was hunting it there where we'd always seen them.
BZ and Marshmallow. You guys.
You're the one that saw BZ.
I know,
ding-dong.
but you named it. I
didn't name it Marshmallow.
Point out the fact that they named a deer Marshmallow.
Alyssa did,
We
because
also
you
named
could
one
see
Hershey.
Hershey and.
All I was looking for was cracker, and I'd have had the s'mores.
Oh Lordy.
Cut.
It just wasn't the right fit.
That specific area, though, was, like you're saying, tons and tons of deer. And then the one year I had a completely different crop rotation. I didn't notice it till later on in the year that's what the reasoning was. I was hunting all the same places we were hunting the year before, and I couldn't find a freaking deer. And I had to move. It only ended up being like a couple 100 yards where they were living in comparison was a lot further than that. But from where my stand was to the new spot was only a couple 100 yards where I was missing them. And when I found where they were at again, now they were doing the same thing as what you're talking about, but they were in a different area. And now you can watch them go back and forth. You can watch when it's a certain year. They'll be over here a little more often, and they may not be going all the way out to the ag fields, but something's different that they're going out that way. So
see, and I think it's important to point out that the two places you guys are talking about, there is no you've done no additional food plots or anything like that. You're dealing with whatever's naturally there.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I can tell someone that I learned that keep in mind if you're going to plant, whether it's clover or whether and here's what I would say, my clover plots got hammered in October when I was expecting my brassica plots to really get pounded. And I would watch deer come out and they would nibble around in the brassicas and then work their way over to the clover.
Brassicas normally, though, we're hunting more late season when it gets colder. So
typically, but there was so much green in there that typically I'll see them on that soft leaf. They're not digging for the
not getting the turnips and stuff.
Not looking for the vegetable yet. However, when we had that cold snap hit, and it just by dumb luck, trail camera helped some, but we sat there a couple of times, Nick and I did, and my morning hunts on my food plots were unreal. Like all the deer were coming from ag, but it was like, well, we'll go back and we'll not only go bed, but we're going to go grab a snack off this green lush field. And yet then, so I'm coming back in the afternoon thinking, I already know they're here. This is going to be money.
No deer.
A doe, a fawn, one or two deer might wander in, but they all didn't come back there. They went back to the ag. But then I came back the next morning, and if I could get the wind right, and like you were talking about later, they were coming from the ag. It would take them an hour and a half, and all of a sudden, I might have 25, 30 deer in a half-acre field. And it didn't happen just once. It happened multiple times. So starting to pay attention to that and say, okay, there is a time. And then that's what I was just saying about the green just here in the last week. We had snow cover. They couldn't get to any of the alfalfa. When I'm talking green, I'm talking alfalfa. In some cases, we have some, what am I trying? It's clover. It's mixed stuff. Because it's not stuff necessarily that I planted from Antler King. It's stuff that the farmer planted, but they couldn't get it's cut so short. They were late coming, and so it doesn't have a lot of growth there.
Yep.
Soon as the snow was gone, I called you that day and said, okay, I told you that I didn't have any deer on my place. I'm talking no trail camera pictures of deer. I can see a lot of them out the window of the house, and I haven't seen a deer. And there's 8 deer standing in the yard. Soon as that left, they were back.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely change where they're going depending on the weather and stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the one that I throw into the mix. We had a farmer that added an alfalfa field that we had a big one that he's cutting alfalfa, and that changed the deer movement there dramatically. I don't think we picked up on it until last year. I think we didn't realize until you started late season hunting.
Yeah.
That we really realized how many more deer are staying
that was
here.
Only because of a cheater cam. I got a picture of a deer, and then I was like, holy crap. There was like 30 of them behind it. And because I wasn't thinking alfalfa at all. And then I was like, we need to go sit down there. I mean, there's a crap ton of deer. And we go down there, and there's just piles of them.
Right.
I think the biggest thing.
I also see alfalfa getting hammered like during the summer, too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If they're
love
not in
alfalfa.
the beans or corn or something, that's the next best I would always find them in. And there might be more in there. You just can't see them when they're in corn, or sometimes even the beans in Iowa get so tall that you can't see them in there either. But I see quite a few in alfalfa, which is surprising because I was always used to, like when we lived in Montana, you guys loved, I was young, that's why I say you guys, but you guys loved going to alfalfa, like when we're going to look for elk or look for deer and stuff like that. And every animal out there loves alfalfa, but they don't have
No
corn
other
or
green.
beans.
Yeah, there's no other green food within many, many miles. Here they at least have some choices, but definitely the alfalfa definitely is just as big a pull as a cornfield or a bean field.
Yep.
Especially when it's in a situation like this one is, where it's a big field and they could come in there and feel comfortable and get in there, because you end up killing a deer there late season last year. And so it can hold a bunch of deer. The other thing that I think that it's important is that you start to see, not only are you seeing the deer that are making it, the ones that are still alive, but you're seeing how many deer do I have here? I mean, in the case where you're talking about where you hunted last night, in the last couple of days, you got plenty of deer. We actually need to kill more does up there. There's probably still too many deer. But we go to some other places, and it's not, it's not that big of a problem. It's not as many deer like that. But you got to be careful. If I went and hunted my own place in the last 2 weeks, someone could go, you don't have any deer.
Yeah, but that's because they're all congregated somewhere else.
Yeah, they all are on that food source.
Yeah.
So don't be too leery when don't let that work against you. I think you brought up something, Warren, the other day. When it comes to scouting at this time of year, though, it's so freaking easy. It's just,
as long as there's snow on the ground, snow makes it easier.
I don't know. I think even when the snow's gone, you see the black trails because it's wet.
Yeah.
And
so I think
the rubs stand out.
We need to do fast forward and rewind because we're not going to be able to do this. There's not a ton of things we're doing right now to get ready for next year. But I think that in the next month or two,
I'm about to.
Well, what Dad's talking about is basically shed season. You're walking around and everything. So I want to back up real quick and just talk about one thing I learned from this year that I think that I'm going to try to apply more next year is, and I don't know, maybe this needs to be its own entire podcast, but I am telling you that I am really, really, really intrigued with these deer zones. So you just talked about, that your deer were only 200 yards away, right? And we have Gobbler Knob. If you moved Gobbler Knob 200 yards any which direction, you would not see the amount of deer that you see. I don't believe. Maybe if you moved it to the southeast, but you're never going to get in there. So I still think you're probably not going to because you're going to screw them all up. But anyways, the point is what I'm saying is the amount of, I feel like these bucks all have their own little zones that there's hard borders where they won't expand out of that. And so sometimes we don't put up a camera that's 200 yards away on a big scrape because we're like, it's going to get the same deer. And what I think we're learning is that's not the case, especially if you have stuff where there's just different different kinds of terrain that here we have a deer that we've discovered that's a nice deer that no pictures of him, nothing. Never seen the deer for over a year, even though we know him. And I think if we'd have had a camera on a different part of this ground for the entire year, we'd probably seen him multiple times, at least on camera.
Talking about the one that just got killed?
No,
No.
the bigger one.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Could
Well, I think we would have because
I would agree with that.
yeah, especially with when Brett saw him. So I think here you can have deer that are around you and that are right on, like Magnum. Only one picture of him on that camera that from last year that we were hunting, and you'd have thought, oh, this deer, who's this random buck, and he was all over it, But that was just like the very southern border of his spot. But I think going back to what you were saying, yes, I think scouting in the next 2 months is my favorite time of the year that isn't actually hunting season by far.
I don't know. It's good. I don't know if I would call it my favorite, but it's the easiest.
It's my favorite.
I mean, no. Number one, I love to look for sheds. Number two, I'm looking for sheds in areas where the deer obviously spend their time. It has changed some of the stand locations that I've had put in and things like that. But I definitely, maybe next to, because food isn't the biggest one that I'm starting to really like look at more. The biggest one is the scent stuff that we're doing with our rub trees. That has changed the game for me. I mean, I've killed 2 deer. I didn't kill one last year going to it. You did. I killed one going to it this year. I mean, he's standing right beside the tree when I shot him. And I do think that it's a game changer. But you have to do all the other scouting. You have to do everything to get.
So when you say that, what are you doing different then? Like, how is it a different way that you're going to be utilizing the scents or the areas, or what is it that you're doing?
I think what I'm talking about is being able to take a large area like a field edge or something like that, and when I can't get it where the wind is mostly in that direction or whatever, I can put a rub tree in there and force them in a big, large open area to be at one spot. And know that I have so much confidence in it that I would sit there even if they didn't come over. I would know I have a reason to pull them over here. Every one of our trees, even though we had some issues with getting started on some of them, I think those are some things that we learned. When I flipped trees, I took one tree from one farm and put it on another one. We went crazy. But what I definitely learned is that you can manipulate them. I mean, and quickly. I mean, in the case of the deer I shot, it was in less than 2 days. It was like 36 hours from the middle of the day when I put it in to the morning that I hunted, and he was walking to that tree.
Yeah.
I mean, so that can, man, just imagine putting in your food plot, getting it all dialed in, and you got everything ready, and now you're trying to go from, okay, I can get him to within 50 yards. Or 100 yards, or however big your food plot is. Now I'm going to be able to take that 100 yards, and I got him where he wants to be. He's comfortable. It's covered. You got trees all around. You put this food plot in there, and they're there to eating what they want. And now I can take him from there and put him 20 yards from my tree.
I think I'm going to apply that in the timber.
Yeah, I know you said that you kind of halfway did it this year, but not intending on hunting it. And
right, which was stupid. But now, I think I learned from that because looking into the next 2 months, I'm going to be, when I'm walking places and looking at shed hunting, and the very first thing I'm trying to do is establish sign from October and November, rubs, scrapes, right. Where these deer are spending the majority of their time. And then I'm going to spend more time figuring out a tree. Where could I get into this, especially if I keep using my saddle, like marking some trees so that I have an idea before I'm trying to go in there blind, because I made that mistake this year. But I've already done that before, and some stuff I found is there's places where in order to get where you really need to try to pinch them down to something that gives you a shot, you got to really, really gamble. Where I think that I can take a tree now, a rub tree, and I can use it, not have to be so risky and just get in close and get that deer, as long as he's near it, during October or something like that when he's not chasing does. I think that I can get him to come over and hit it, and I'll just shoot him right there, which I think is a huge advantage.
Yep. But and so I think that's a big change. Like I said, paying more attention to the food specifically as it relates to weather. That would be one of my biggest things that I'm going to take away from this year. And then the third one is So I did some of the saddle stuff with you guys. I haven't done it near to the extent of what, but I do think that like on a new farm or a new piece of ground, it's probably the best way to go because you can change. You're not locked in. You don't have everything. I mean, as long as you get it down to, down to a science of where it's all carryable and stuff like that. It's definitely it's a tougher situation for us because we're packing cameras and things like that. Where an individual though, man, if I was just a guy hunting and trying to kill a good deer, it might be really quickly looking at becoming one of the best ways for me to hunt an area and know that I can go in, see especially a new area.
Yeah. Yeah, the benefit of being able to learn so much quicker without, I don't know what it is with your stand. For me, it's just like, I just have this mental block of, wow, I don't want to move everything over there. And that might be partly because we are setting up all of the camera gear and everything too.
2 stands and
yeah.
No, I didn't care anymore this year. I used to be that way too, like where I just didn't want to move it that much, and I got over that real quick this year. I moved stuff so much.
With Eli and I, though, it wasn't that bad. Like, Eli and I were pretty quick. We were about 15 minutes, but he also knew what he was doing on his side. So
now, do you think that you could have moved stuff too much?
Yeah. Yes and no. I say that because I was just in I was not just me, but I was in there too much in combination with other people being in there and then moving around. I think sometimes it was I made a couple moves that were huge. If I wouldn't have made those moves, like I wouldn't have had Elway at 15 yards. If I wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have even known the deer existed or certain things like that. But at the same time, I think I moved some of them so much that I was just pushing the deer around or away is all I was doing. So, yes, I do think I moved too much. And at the same time, I think there's a few that I definitely needed to do. So, I was too lax on moving around. Now, granted, I was doing it in time. Like, the amount of stands I hung in the dark, I have no idea, because the majority of them I would either get out of a stand and go set another one in the evening or drive out there and do another one. Pretty much everybody here except for Eli, I think, has watched me set one in dark at some point or another. So I'd say I definitely moved too much, but I think you also need it. I think you need to be able to move sometimes. So
I don't know. So what would be your takeaway from this season? That you think that you can do better for next year?
Staying out more, because I even tried. It's to the point now where I won't. We've argued about it on here before. We've talked about your perspective. We talked about his perspective and other people. Some people say like I won't check a camera, but maybe once a year, or not once a year, once a month. It's like they do not want to touch that area. You're at your house. You're there. You're all the time, all the way around. And sometimes you even intentionally are around doing stuff because as long as you keep them used to you, it makes life a heck of a lot easier. Well, I was under the anticipation or the understanding that I don't want to be in there a ton, but the more I am in there, the more they'll get used to me, hopefully. And I wasn't intentionally doing that this summer, but I did without knowing it because I was there every weekend. Every single weekend I was checking cameras, I was setting a stand or doing something along the lines of getting ready for the season, and that was for 2 months. And this was the most screwed up year I've had in 4 years on that one place. And I think that directly correlates to the fact that these deer are not used to having, I watched my farmer last night, actually watched him. There's deer that were like 60 yards from me. And he was over on the other side of the field walking to check his cows, and they 100% saw him. But they didn't care because they knew he was just going over to the cows. And so I thought that throughout summertime and stuff like that, it would be the same thing. They'll think I'm just a farmer or something. And that just isn't the case because his cows aren't in there all the time. He's not in there all the time. So when all of a sudden I was in there all the time, it completely screwed him up. So going into this next year, I'll go set my cameras. I'll go do everything I did last summer as far as preparation wise. But I'm leaving it for a lot longer or I'm rotating stuff. Like I'll go check this section of cameras on a weekend and leave this stuff untouched for a couple weeks or a month or whatever and go check those ones. So and then moving as far as during the season, like I know I got certain areas that I favorite because I know where the deer are at and I know them a little better. And I try to go in there, but I'll rotate around a little bit more so I'm not so pressured. in certain areas.
So you brought up going back to what we've been talking about with the wind and what these deer are doing now. Do you think that you could you take any of that and apply that to next year? Basically saying, okay, if these deer are coming to this field, because right now that's the beauty of it, is they are coming to the fields to eat.
Yeah.
And so can you use that information to be able to say, okay, next year when I do want to hunt somewhere close to here, not that I'm hunting the food source, that necessarily that's what I'm doing. It's not late season. I'm talking in October, November, but knowing these deer probably are going to approach that field from this direction.
You could. I don't know that. I'm not sure if it would make a difference. This year I kept a log on Magnum. So I've talked to a lot of other guys, that they track the wind direction, the pressure, everything that deer did. And I did that with him. Every trail camera picture, every time that I saw him, the direction that he was going, direction he came from. Any piece of information that I knew, I logged all of it. And I don't think it helped me kill him at all. I would love to say that it was worth it, but like where Eli and I killed him, and the time that we killed him, like I never had a photo, never seen him coming from the direction that he did. Anything that he did didn't make any sense. I mean, really, we got lucky to an extent because I was 100%. I did feel as though we were on him in the timber. We were set up on a pasture and the timber. I felt like in the timber, we were on him. Like this is his bedroom, and I really was expecting to see him coming in through that timber somewhere, coming back from ag or whatever, and he came from the last place I would have told you he was going to come from. But we did set up. That was where I was trying to be humble, and I was like, well, I'm going to set up on this pasture where I can shoot it still, just in case I'm completely wrong and he does it. But it didn't seem, all of that information, it didn't do me any good. And I think that the one thing I learned more so from this year that I would take is I won't be just hunting deer during October. Like I'm not going to be just trying to hunt right now I feel like I'm kind of hunting the herd,
Right.
What all the deer are doing. I don't really care about what all of them are doing next year. I care about what that specific one is doing that I want to try to kill, which I think he said, that he's not going to go in there once a year, but they probably don't do it near as much now, but I know a lot of other guys that they used to do that where they would just put a camera, in really good bedding areas, real down thick where you wouldn't necessarily want to be going all of the time. And then they take that information that they got from the previous year and try to apply it to the deer next year, which I think was really wise before there was cell cams. But now you could go and take a cell cam in there, and now you're getting that information live time.
Right.
So I think
I think that we would all agree that October is that time to kill that target deer.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look back on the year and we say that is it, and honestly, I think in our situation, it depends on which farm. If we did a better job of making sure we had the right crop rotation or had the right crops left where we want them strategically, I don't think you would be having the issue you're having. I think they would come to that single spot. We're going off of whatever was left.
Yeah.
We didn't manipulate this, or we didn't leave any standing beans. We didn't do it. The farmer took out whatever, and we're hunting that.
Yeah, I think if there were standing beans, I don't think that you'd be fighting with this because I think that would overtake the when all their options are the same, why wouldn't they be a little more careful? Where when it's the buffet over here, I think that you can get them to. They're just going to all the plethora of food,
and especially when we had the right weather, and we had it. Now maybe not so much because now the weather's not the driving force that it's been in the last few days. And for those that don't understand what we're talking about, is we had some below zero weather that was snow on the ground, and I mean, had you had the right standing beans or standing corn even, or something that was an extra amount of food, also like a food plot of brassicas, and it came up well. And it was the year that Mitch killed that deer. That was the last time that we had really good rain, and I had food plots where it didn't matter how long of the year it went, I still had food there.
right?
Then that would be but you need that weather. You need that. I don't know whether it has to be below zero, but you definitely want it cold. You definitely want it snowy to some degree. What you don't want is what we're dealing with now, which is winter, but it's not. It's 30, 35 degrees going down in the 20s at night. It's not really as big a driver as what it could be. It's much more comfortable to hunt, but it's just not the deer. Excuse me, it's not the deer driver.
Yep.
So So anyhow, I think that's roughly where we're at right now. What we've done, what we're going to be. The next time that we talk, I think about this subject, we'll start talking about some frost seeding and things like that, about what you can do to start prepping for next year. We'll be talking about picking up sheds. We'll be talking about the trails and the rubs and what we've seen and why some rubs mean something a little different to us. We'll talk about creek crossings and different things because, at least here in Iowa, we get cold enough that you can walk rivers. It'll freeze enough that you can go do that kind of stuff. And, man, it allows you to get into some areas and see things and stuff like that normally during the year is hard to get to.
Yep.
So any other comments or things that we wanted to make sure that we covered? I think we just wanted to cover this time of year.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Well, that's it for today. We're going to Warren's going to go climb back in a blind, I guess, and see if are you going hunting this afternoon, Easton?
I haven't decided yet.
He's still trying to decide. You got your new hype hat on, I see.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of fancy. All right. Well, just want to thank everyone for the, again, thank you for the reviews. Thank you for the shares. If you haven't done it, please do so. Please let your friends know, that this is a podcast where we're trying to take on the topics that are tough, but we're also trying to educate you guys and help you. We do realize we get to do a lot more than the average guy. Most guys got a job they have to go to week after week, and maybe they're hunting weekends, or you get a week off. We get to do this. Easton is proof positive. 50 some days, because this is what we're doing. This is what it's all about. So again, thank you for the comments. Thank you for sharing, and the other thing still, just topics. Send in topics, send in questions if you have them. We don't care how you do it. It can be through any form of social media. We certainly appreciate it. And again, be safe out there. Good luck, guys, because I know our season ends in 5 days, we said, or 4 days, and I think some other seasons are pretty close to ending. But be very careful this time of year, especially lots of clothes on, climbing tree stands and stuff like that. We've heard of some bad things happening to people. No one's gotten deathly hurt, but we don't want to hear about that. So, all right, thanks for watching. Appreciate you guys.